Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Legendary Lords in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. And in this particular video, I want to talk about what makes a Legendary Lord strong, and also to talk about the Legendary Lords that aren't so strong and what makes them so. It is a combination of factors, starting with race. Looking at the greenskins, one of the first things to mention about the greenskins is actually their economy. And the way the greenskin economy works is that it's heavily reliant on post-battle loot, as well as looting and occupying a settlement, or just outright sacking a settlement and then taking it over. So over here, it's Gorge of Rock. It's the first settlement in Grimgor, who is a very powerful Legendary Lord, and is widely considered a powerful Legendary Lord. This is the first settlement. It's a tier 1 settlement. Just after resolving this battle, I got 534 money from that. And then if I sack it, I either gain 4% unit replenishment or 480 income from it. Now, between the amount of money that I just gained from that, as well as the amount of money that I gained from the initial battle, I am at over 8k. And this is just the literal first 2 battles that you fight in a campaign that are giving me a substantial amount of income. Because having that kind of money from the very beginning of my campaign is going to give me a significant advantage on the campaign map. Like literally there, if I just spend all the money I would normally, I'm still at 3.7k. And I can do this again and again and again as the greenskins to earn a ridiculous sum of money in the campaign. And having that kind of early game money, especially, but not just early game, late game as well, gives this particular campaign and the greenskins in general a significant amount of potential, because it means that they can get so much money that doesn't matter if their economy is completely in the red. As long as they can sack 1 or 2 settlements every single turn, they will have enough money to not go bankrupt and actually get all the structures they need. And what this translates into is having a ridiculous number of armies. Yes, because right now, for instance, with Grimgor, I know I have a good amount of money, so what I can do from turn 1 is start going in global recruitment, because I know I'm going to eliminate Karak Vrag over here, the camp, Black Fang, and get even more money. I will not run out of money in this particular campaign, not easily. That's the first thing. The economy of a race is very important, but it's not just that you're earning a lot of money for sacking settlements, is that the units themselves that you're recruiting are very, very cheap. Like a unit of Goblin Archers, which is quite effective in the early game, is only 356 income to spend on with 98 upkeep. That is a substantial amount of money, and that means that through this province alone, I can maintain 2 full stacks without going bankrupt, free if I'm fine going into the red, and relying on having to fight at least 1 battle and winning a battle every single turn in order to keep the momentum going. The most powerful Legendary Lords in the game are those that can do something every single turn. They can win a battle and just keep that momentum going. That will allow them to capture a very significant amount of territory, get a lot of structures, get a lot of armies, get a lot of heroes all over the campaign map, and dominate the campaign map. On top of that, it's also the campaign design in itself. Like looking at Grimgor's situation, he starts in a good province over here in Kashgadrak. You also have gemstones, and the minor ogre faction that controls this territory is going to be a pushover for Grimgor to deal with. He also has the potential of a confederation with the Tusk Sons over here to the north. And while there are some pretty powerful Legendary Lords, Astrogoth over here in Zornus Kul, Kolic over here in the Chimera Plateau, and in the Valerie we have Zaytan, while there are certainly some powerful Legendary Lords over here for him to deal with, as well as the potential of going up against Zarna Grund, Grimgor is actually in such a situation in terms of his campaign design that every single turn he is able to fight at least 1 battle, if not multiple battles, expand his territory, take out opponents, get a lot of post-battle loot, and just get very, very rich very quickly without encountering too much opposition. I mean, the opposition does exist. It's not a completely free ride, especially if you're trying to take down Zarnagrund without cheesing it specifically. But you do also have a good amount of flexibility. And it's kind of like that balancing act. Do you want to have a campaign that just complete steamroll and annihilate everyone? Or do you want a campaign with a level of challenge, but not such a level of challenge that it ultimately ends up limiting your empire? It is a difficult balancing act, to be clear. Though I would say in general, there are very powerful Legendary Lords that can have hard campaigns, that can have a lot of foes to fight even powerful ones, as long as they have the tools needed to succeed against those opponents, like Drazif the Ashen, for instance, of the Chaos Dwarfs. On top of that, another thing that plays a major role is climate suitability. Looking at Grimgor, we can see that the wasteland, the mountains that surround him, because he is in the mountains of Morn, he has the Darklands to the west, there's even further mountains over here to the west. All of this territory is up for grabs. And that's crucial because it means that Grimgor can expand across a vast array of territory very quickly and make it part of his empire. And also, fun fact, greenskin structures are relatively cheap, especially at lower tier. Like the base economic structure, which generates 250 income, only costs 250 to make. Tier 2, 500. So not only are greenskins earning a lot of money early on, but on top of that, the structures they're building are very quick to build. And furthermore, the greenskins have a good amount of growth. A combination of a commandment over here, as well as the ability to get the WA meter full up and get 30 growth. And also, very fitting to their race, every single settlement they control in a province increases their local recruitment capacity by 1. It's a combination of these things, like climate suitability, having the ability to expand across a vast array of territory, having a good economy, and so on. Then there's the faction effects. Grimgor gets the ability of recruiting Black Orc big bosses in every single province. Though we already started one, so it's not too important early on. His WAs have a chance to contain Black Orcs, and Black Orcs are pretty good units, so having them in a WA army, or in every WA army, is something that gives you a significant amount of combat potential. It also is something that makes Grimgor an absolute nightmare to deal with. Then campaign movement range, so you can get across the campaign map much faster, and then an upkeep benefit for Black Orcs and Big Guns. The Black Orc benefit in particular is substantial because Black Orcs otherwise can be pretty expensive, but having a minus 15% upkeep is pretty powerful. Then there's the Lord effects. He gets more post-battle loot, armor, leadership, the ability of your next, so that makes him really good at killing lords and heroes in battle, and obviously a special WA. Then special skill line, he gets more Black Orc big bosses, so you can get free very quickly in your campaign, and these guys are pretty solid. Various benefits for the Black Orcs, fear and terror, HP, and frenzy. And then also he has 2 pretty good items as well. That is one of them that's also going to increase your post-battle loot, get magical attacks, get Snick, get Bloodforged armor as abilities. So all of these factors combined, on top of the fact that the greenskins have a pretty powerful unit roster from like any settlement, like Goblin Archers are pretty effective, especially because a lot of the research you get here in the research tree, it's very easy to access it, and it gives you a lot of benefits like further campaign movement range, upkeep for Goblin units, missile strength, leadership for Goblin units, armor for Goblin units. So significant number of benefits that will really boost his early game army. And having a very powerful early game is something that's going to help you create a very massive empire in short order. And as Grimgor, you will genuinely outpace the AI if you know what you're doing. If you're being very aggressive, you can get very far very quickly. And this has been the case with Grimgor since Warhammer 3 launched, but it is absolutely ridiculous how far you can get in a campaign at the moment. This is what makes a legendary lord strong. The combination of race, faction effects, climate, campaign design overall is what makes one strong. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have someone like Lord Mazdamundi. First off, he's a Lizardmen legendary lord, and while the Lizardmen certainly aren't a bad race, they do have certain limitations. Their units can be pretty expensive, and they're not necessarily that much better than units that you can recruit, that other races can recruit much cheaper in their campaign. And their economy is not of such a nature that they are able to maintain those units. Like, as an example, their main economic building, it costs twice as much as the greenskins at tier 1 and won't generate as much money. On top of that, one severe limitation in a Lizardmen campaign is how they increase their hero capacity. For them to increase their hero capacity, they need to get tier 3 for a skink chief, and that is the best case scenario in their campaign. Or for Scar veterans, they need to get to tier 4, or looking at skink oracles and skink priests. Well, skink priests requires tier 4, skink oracle capacity requires tier 5. In fact, I think this is one of the worst situations in the game when it comes to hero capacity, and heroes are power. They're magic users, they're duelists. Not being able to increase hero capacity, having expensive army, does mean your campaign is more limited. And this is certainly a problem in Lizardmen campaigns. Though there are obviously exceptions, like you can look at the Cult of Sotik, you can look at Axiatl, who can make it work despite that, but still even they end up limited in some way, shape, or form in their campaign because of these very issues. And then Mazdamundi himself is not a great legendary lord. I mean, he can be considered good to confederate, but not to play. I mean, the way you can see Mazdamundi is if you're playing another Lizardman campaign, confederating him, giving him a Temple Guard army, and using him as a very powerful magic user, though he isn't the most powerful magic user in the game, but using him for magic can be useful, because he doesn't really have a special skill line, except like just getting a bunch of magical benefits in his own army. The best legendary lords are those that give you a special skill line that brings some kind of faction benefits. Like Grungor himself giving you that Black Orc capacity, for instance, is a pretty substantial faction benefit, because it means you have free heroes, they're giving you training. Mazdamundi has, well, squat when it comes to his campaign. He just gets 2 powerful spells, a bunch of Winds of Magic, sure, in his campaign, Terror, Regeneration. So he's all about those selfish benefits, but even then he isn't the most powerful on the campaign map. His faction effects are also pretty pathetic. Suffering -10 in diplomacy with most factions is not a great situation to deal with in your campaign. Getting -50% construction costs for the Star Chamber buildings, it doesn't really matter that much, because a Star Chamber is a tier 3 structure that can give you a hero recruit rank +2 income from all buildings. It's a good structure, but basically, even without this benefit, it's only 3,000 to get to that. It's not like you're going to build them in such quantities in your campaign that is really, really going to matter. I mean, you will in quite a few provinces, but you also have other priorities as well when it comes to it. And just reducing this one building by 50% is not too significant. Like if you had a benefit to reduce, like say, I know, the main Selma building by 50%, that would be pretty damn substantial. But as it is, reducing the cost of only one building by 50% isn't good enough. And then he can reduce right costs by 30%. But the thing about rights is that, one, they have a very long cooldown, so you're not going to be spamming them in your campaign willy-nilly. And two, when you use a right, you do get a cooldown on using the other, so there is limitations on that. And 30% is not good enough, I feel. Like, if you're gonna use the right of primeval glory, sure, it will save you a decent amount of money, but you wouldn't want to use it early on in the campaign unless it's an emergency anyway, because the army that you're gonna spawn is going to be fairly brutal on your economy. So it's a last-ditch effort to use this. In general, it's like just an emergency situation to deal with this. Like, you can't really afford this army early on, and later on, well, you'll be far away from your capital. Furthermore, with Mazdamundi's campaign, he can only really go into the jungles. Like he has savanna, he has desert, he has jungle. And because of the way his starting position is, he can't really go north because the territory there is flat out uninhabitable, so you can't expand north. So you're always in the situation when you're playing a Mazdamundi campaign where you secure your initial province, you secure the isthmus, and then you just move south. And you'll always do this in every campaign, which means that your campaign is going to end up being pre-limited as a result of it. Furthermore, he has pretty powerful early game opponents. You know a campaign is bad or a Legendary Lord is bad when his early game opponents can give him a hell of a challenge. Like there's a Keeper secrets over here, like the Keepers of List, or their faction leader, is quite capable of defeating your entire army, maybe even on his own when you are dealing with him. So that is a fairly brutal situation to deal with. Then you've got the heavily fortified defenses of Skeggi, where there is an incredibly powerful garrison to contend with. And Norskins getting a lot of berserkers will create a lot of issues in your campaign if you're playing as Mazdamundi. So his early game is brutal, which means that his campaign ends up being limited. Like winning the early game as Mazdamundi is far more difficult than in other campaigns, and you're not really getting any kind of substantial rewards for doing it. It's a lot of effort that doesn't really have the necessary payoff. I'd argue in that. Like if you want to make a contrast between this campaign and Grimgor's campaign, in Grimgor's campaign you have the ability of having a very difficult early game fight, but there's a major payoff in taking out Zarna Grund early on in the campaign, and you don't have to do it. It's not something you have to do. You don't have only one particular path you have to follow in a campaign. That kind of flexibility on the campaign map is something that can give you power, because it means you can react to different situations in very different ways dependent on how things have transpired. If you have only one particular path you can follow every single time, well, one, the campaign is going to be very boring to do more than once, and two, it is going to severely limit you in how you approach that campaign. So someone like Mazdamundi is quite weak compared to someone like Grimgor. Of course, there is another type of Legendary Lord to talk about in Warhammer 3, and that's the type of Legendary Lord who is powerful, without the doubt, but is so ridiculously powerful that you're just going to completely steamroll the campaign, like Archaon the Ever-Chosen, or virtually all of the Legendary Lords of the Warriors of Chaos. Maybe Village less so, but in general, Warriors of Chaos are ridiculously powerful. So powerful that they just end up dominating every single campaign. Like, look at this. This is turn 24. While I certainly am not the strongest faction on the map, I have a fairly good amount of territory under my control or vassal control, and no one is going to be able to stop me in this campaign. In fact, I care so little about the other factions that I'm literally here in forced march stance against Kostaltin, and his armies are still intact, but if Kostaltin dares to attack me, I'll just wipe him out with ease. That is how powerful Archaon is. But this is not really a great campaign, though, because what you're going to end up doing is just like going from battle to battle to battle, out-resolving every single encounter, and just completely decimating your opponents with ease, without any effort whatsoever. In this entire campaign, on Legendary Very Hard, outside of the quest battles, the only battle I've had to fight has been against Boris Ursus' main army. And if I had handled things better, I could have even avoided having to fight his army, and certainly would have helped me out if he had kept its Sargard and Warbear Riders in his campaign over here, as opposed to ending up with this disgusting crap in his campaign situation over here. But at this point, like, this is the kind of campaign where you win from turn one with no effort whatsoever. And that can be fine, you know, once or twice if you just want to steamroll a map. But I think when you're talking about good Legendary Lords, you don't just want a campaign where you do something like this, because it ends up being very boring very, very quickly when you know you've won the campaign the moment you started it on the highest difficulty, and you're doing it with ease, with no effort. Because look at the situation. I'll just take out Kostaltin, take his cities, confederate him, and after that, do the same with Katrin, maybe take out Prague myself. Well, not confederate him, vassalize Helpit, and get a ridiculous amount of campaign power over here very, very quickly, and to the point that no one will be able to stop me. And also, I also will get Azazel here pretty quickly in a campaign with another army to throw at my enemies. And while certainly you can be in a vulnerable spot with the Warriors of Caste, like before you get Warriors of Caste themselves, like when you're using just Marauders or an army like this, you can certainly be in a vulnerable spot. Overall, you're in such a position that you genuinely can lose a campaign unless you screw it up in a completely royal fashion. And even then, you might not be able to lose, because between your vassals and your Dark Fortresses, like at this point, I could literally disband my army, and I don't think, like, if the entire world declared war on me, that I would lose very, very easily. It would take dozens and dozens of turns for that to happen, if it happened at all. That's where things are ridiculous. And I think that for all the great things that Creative Assembly did with the Warriors of Chaos rework, and to be clear, it was a really good rework, they went a bit too far, I think, when it came to the design, like just creating a massive imbalance. Like, you want to see races that are well designed, like look at the Chaos Dwarves. Like the Chaos Dwarves, yeah, they're powerful, but you have to earn that power. Same with the Greenskin, same with the Dark Elves, same with the High Elves. You have to earn that power, whereas Warriors of Chaos, you're just like steamrolling the campaign map from turn 1. Anyway, that's all there is to say. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.